There's a moment in every major story where things stop looking like headlines and start feeling like pressure. This is one of those moments. Because what just happened with Kirk's widow, Erika, isn't just a routine cancellation. It's not one of those quiet withdrawals people gloss over and move on from. Before we dive deep, take a moment to like this video, share and subscribe to the channel because this one hits differently, and the deeper you look at it, the more it starts to reveal just how tense, how charged, and how unresolved this entire situation still is. She was scheduled to appear at a public event. Not alone, not in some low-key setting, but alongside U.S. Vice President JD Vance. That detail matters more than people might initially think. Events involving a sitting vice president are not casual. They are layered with security, planning, and control. Every attendee is vetted. Every movement is calculated. These are environments designed to be as safe as possible. And yet, she didn't show. First glance, some people might assume it's just caution. Maybe she didn't feel ready. Maybe the attention was too much. But that's not what this was. The reason given, serious threats against her life, changes everything. 'Cause now we're not dealing with speculation. We're dealing with something concrete enough to disrupt a high-level political appearance. And when that happens, it forces a shift in how we look at the entire situation surrounding Kirk, his legacy, and the movement that continues to build around his name. Think about what that actually implies. For someone connected to a case like this to receive threats is one thing. Unfortunately, that's become almost expected in highly polarized situations. But for those threats to reach a level where participation in a controlled, secured vice presidential event is deemed unsafe, that's another level entirely. Suggests coordination, or at the very least, persistence. Suggests that whatever emotions were sparked by Kirk's case haven't faded. They haven't cooled off. If anything, they've hardened. And this is where the story starts to widen. Because Erika isn't just a widow in the passive sense. In cases like this, she becomes a symbol, whether she wants that role or not. To some, she represents loyalty, grief, and continuity. To others, she may represent unanswered questions, frustration, or even opposition depending on how they interpret the situation. And when a person becomes a symbol, they stop being seen as just an individual. They become a focal point. That's when things can shift from emotional to volatile. Now pause for a moment, because this is where it really matters to stay engaged with what's unfolding. If you're following this story and want to keep getting clear breakdowns like this, take a second right now to like the video, share it with someone else who's been tracking this case, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. 'Cause what comes next might not be predictable. Back to the situation. Presence of JD Vance at that event adds another layer of weight. This wasn't just about visibility, it was about alignment. Appearing together sends a message, whether intentional or not. Signals recognition. Signals relevance. And in some cases, it signals support or at least acknowledgement. So when Erika pulls out under these circumstances, it doesn't just cancel an appearance. It disrupts a message that was about to be delivered. And people notice that. Supporters notice. Critics notice. Observers who have been sitting on the fence notice. Because the absence becomes louder than the presence would have been. Now here's where the tension becomes even more clear. Threats like this don't exist in a vacuum. They are usually fueled by something: emotion, ideology, anger, fear, or a mix of all four. And when those elements stay active over time, they don't just disappear quietly. They build pressure. Kirk's case has already proven to be one of those situations that doesn't settle easily, doesn't fade into the background. Every update, every new detail, every public mention seems to reignite conversations that were never fully resolved in the first place. And that creates a cycle. A cycle where attention leads to reaction, reaction leads to escalation, and escalation leads to moments like this. Moments where people start pulling back. Not because they want to disappear, but because the environment around them becomes unpredictable. Erika stepping away is a signal, not necessarily of retreat, but of risk assessment. And when people close to a situation begin making decisions based on safety concerns, it usually means there are things happening beneath the surface that the public isn't fully seeing. That's important, because what we often get publicly is only a fraction of what's actually unfolding. Behind the scenes, there are likely conversations happening about security, about exposure, about timing, about whether stepping forward right now is worth the potential consequences. And when the answer becomes no, even temporarily, it tells you the stakes are still high. Another angle to consider is how this affects the broader movement surrounding Kirk. Movements thrive on visibility. They grow when people speak, appear, and engage publicly. They gain momentum when figures connected to the story are seen, heard, and actively participating. But when key individuals begin stepping back, even for valid reasons, it introduces uncertainty, creates gaps. And gaps in movements can be filled in different ways. Sometimes they're filled with speculation, sometimes with misinformation, sometimes with louder, more extreme voices trying to take control of the narrative. And that's where things can shift quickly. Because when the center of a movement becomes unstable, the edges tend to stretch. So the question becomes, what happens next? Does Erika return to the public space once the threat level decreases? Or does this mark the beginning of a more cautious, more controlled approach moving forward? Either way, it changes the rhythm of the story. And it forces everyone watching to recalibrate their expectations. Because up until now, there may have been an assumption that things would gradually normalize, that appearances would increase, that tensions would slowly ease. But this moment pushes back against that idea, suggests that whatever is driving this situation is still active, still unresolved, still capable of influencing real-world decisions in a significant way. And that's where the seriousness of this can't be ignored. 'Cause when threats begin shaping public behavior, it moves beyond conversation and into impact. Real impact. Kind that affects not just individuals but the direction of an entire narrative. It's also worth noting how this might influence future events. Organizers may become more cautious about who they invite and how they structure appearances. Security measures may increase. Public access might become more restricted, all of which changes how information is shared and how people engage with the story. In other words, this isn't just a one-time disruption. It could reshape the way this story unfolds moving forward. And for those closely following it, that matters. Because the story is no longer just about what happened, it's about what's still happening. Right now, in real time, and moments like this, where plans change due to safety concerns, are often indicators that the story hasn't reached its peak yet. If anything, it might be building towards something bigger, something that hasn't fully surfaced. So while this may look like a single decision on the surface, it carries weight far beyond that. It reflects tension that hasn't eased. It reveals pressure that's still present, and it reminds everyone watching that this situation is far from settled. So stay alert to the shifts. Watch the patterns. 'Cause sometimes it's not the loudest moments that tell you where a story is going. It's the sudden silences, the withdrawals, the decisions made quietly but for very loud reasons. And this is one of those moments. If you've been following this closely and want to stay ahead of what's developing, make sure you like this video, share it with others who are watching this case unfold, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next update, because the next piece of this story might arrive when people least expect it.